ask for you.
Okay. Oh, I brought one to you just
that's
because
great. Great.
okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Martha, and I'm an alcoholic. Um, I am nervous. So I grew up in the South, in Memphis, and from a very conservative family there. And I was thinking before I came here today about what I was going to say, and I really wanted to start there because in my family, like the thing was, is that as long as you look good and things look good on the outside, then things couldn't be that bad. And our family was crazy. My mom was like mentally ill and crazy, and but we were in our little smock dresses and Mary Janes every Sunday at church and going to Sunday school and all that, and no one had any idea. Um, she, when I was little, she slit her wrist and they sent her off to Hartford, Connecticut to a mental institution. And because it was the 60s, they gave her shock treatment for 2.5 years. So that was like a really big part of, I think, a lot of the emotional stuff that I went through for years. Another thing I want to say about the South is that Southerners can drink. And and to this day, I go back there a lot because I have a lot of family and friends there, and everything revolves around alcohol. I mean, it's cocktail parties and dinner parties and events, brunches. Everything revolves around alcohol. And the weird thing is that there's really like very few big consequences that I see. Like people don't get DUIs, and I'm not sure what that is about in the South, but I think that added a lot to my denial about being an alcoholic or that it was a problem that I was drinking because because everyone does it. I mean, and my dad was definitely an alcoholic. He quit drinking when I was in my 20s because he got diagnosed with cancer, and I have to say, him quitting drinking was such a miracle. For the last 2 years, he was alive. We like totally connected and in a way that we never did while he was drinking. So that is kind of the foundation of what my drinking was like. Because when I think about my drinking growing up, I don't really think of. I mean, I never had like big consequences, but as everyone in this room knows, there's a million just tiny consequences or small consequences from drinking all the time, whether it's getting in the wrong relationship or driving drunk and or just um, saying something mean to somebody or just being inauthentic. I mean, just always like when I was drinking, there was stuff going on that was not my authentic self. But I still never ever thought that I had a problem or that I needed to stop. Um, but we were doing. I mean, we would like I would sneak out of the house and hitchhike and go skinny dipping with people I didn't know. And I mean, it was just like God was totally watching out for us. I mean, for whatever reason. And then we well anyway. I do want to say that when I got into a program and my sponsor had me do my first step and she had me write my history of drinking. Oh my God. What? I was like, what? And like if someone else said this to me, I would just be like, you are definitely a drunk. And my very first time I drank, I stole some scotch from my parents, put it in a mayonnaise jar, and went over to my friend's house. And there were two of us spend the night there, and we decided we wanted to drink it straight so we could get drunk as fast as possible. And when I was 13, and we were so drunk, and we were all sick and passed out, and it was awful. But we thought it was great. We thought that was how it was supposed to be. Um, and so we always, all through high school, it was like cat and mouse, hiding from our parents and being able to get to drink. We would stand outside liquor stores and get people to buy us liquor. Um, and there was an experience I had when I was 14 where I went to a dance and it was like the boys' school. I went to a girls' school and there was a boys' school next door. And I went to that dance and I got really drunk. And there was like a lounge there, and I was passed out on the couch and I was throwing up, and everyone saw me. And I have to say that when I look back, it was one of the most formative things that nights in my life, because I was so ashamed. And it kind of, forever after that, I always felt like everyone had seen me and thought I was really bad and dirty. And it was because I had been so drunk that night, and it really like changed the way that I moved through the world. But I still didn't think alcohol was a problem. So I went through, and I mean, I have a lot of just stories about drinking, but not big consequences from it. And then when I was in my mid 30s, my mom got suicidal again, and she went into a treatment program in Arizona. And I went down for her family week, which was amazing. Like our family, like all of a sudden, everything came out, all the secrets and addiction stuff and all of that. And I actually ended up staying there, and I lived in Arizona for 5 years. And I joined Al-Anon because I can still drink, but I got some familiarity with the 12 steps, but nothing like AA. It was totally different, the meetings that I went to. And then when I was like 2010, I was working doing events, and after the events, I had paperwork to do, and I would sit down with my paperwork. And of course, events, and most of them were weddings, and there was always a ton of alcohol. And I would just sit there late at night until 2 a.m, like at the venue, drinking, doing paperwork, and then I would get in my car and drive home. And I did that so many times, and I was going all the way to South Seattle, and somehow never got a DUI. I don't know how that happened, but I didn't. But I remember I decided to quit drinking, and it wasn't because thought I had a problem, but it was because of vanity, because it was making me fat. So I quit drinking, and I quit for 2.5 years. Then I started again, and then I got into a really stressful corporate job, and I quit drinking again. Oh no, what I did was I sort of crossed the line. Like I started drinking by myself at home every night. And for me, I don't have like a very high tolerance for alcohol. Like drinking a bottle of wine, for me, like I can practically pass out from a bottle of wine. So, every night, and I had this great relationship with this man who was living with me, and I would come home from work, and I was just like, leave me alone. And he and our relationship fell apart because of that, even though it took me really until recently to understand how alcohol had made that happen. And I definitely am going to go make amends to him at some point. But I quit. Let's see, wait. Okay, so I was drinking. Oh, I know. So one night I was sitting in the parking lot of Lowe's, and I was like, I'm just going to go home and drink another bottle of wine. And I picked up the phone, and there was a woman who I call my angel, who is here tonight, who her number was still in my phone, and I hadn't talked to her in years, but she was the only person I knew in AA. And I called her, and she picks it up, and she's like, hey, baby, is this Martha? I said, yeah, everyone knows who it is because she says that. But I was like, yeah. And she's like, hey, our other friend and I are getting ready to go to a meeting. And I was like, oh, I need this. Well, I'm calling you. So we went to a meeting, and I quit drinking. And I went to meetings for a little while, but it was funny because one thing I'm learning about AA is that there's such a variety in the meetings, and some of the meetings that I was going to, because I was working in Auburn, and I was going to these meetings, and they were just like crazy meetings, and there was no recovery, and people were fighting and cross talking, and then what I came to understand was then they would say, okay, if anyone has a little slip to put in the basket, put it in. And literally every single person except for me was court ordered in there. And so they were all trying to like get their meeting in the mornings before work. But I didn't realize that until later, but I quit going to meetings, stayed sober for a few years. And then I went out in the country and I decided I had to drink because I was out of the country. And then, so I was like, okay, I'll just drink when I'm out of the country. And then I was like, and I was like, well, I'll drink when I'm traveling, even if I'm in the country. And then I was like, well, I'll drink when I go out, but just not at home. And then I was back to drinking a bottle of wine a night. And that was this summer. And I picked up the phone and I called that friend again who I hadn't spoken to again in a few years. And she's like, hey, there's a women's meeting today. It's the first meeting I'm going to since the pandemic. Do you want to go? So I walked into the Tuesday Happy, Joyous, and Free meeting. And it was the first time that I experienced AA, like where people are really like doing the steps, and it's focused on that. It's not about stories about getting drunk. It's about doing the steps and the traditions and sponsorship, and it just stayed there. And I couldn't believe how safe I felt there, and that I finally found a place where I felt like I belonged. So I was in what they call, I guess, the pink cloud of like, oh, I'm doing great. I'm going to, I've got this thing. And then I went on a trip. And within the first 10 minutes of walking in the door where we were staying, someone got a pitcher of margaritas and poured me a margarita and handed it to me. And I took it and drank it. And that was really scary for me. And like, understanding like how little control I actually had, and coming back here and like coming into meetings and having to say that like, oh, I went on this trip and I drank the whole time, was like so humbling. And so I got a sponsor who's great, and she's very kind of tuned in to like my slippery stuff, and I have a few meetings I go to, and I decided actually when I came back from Mexico after relapsing like that, I started going to all women's meetings, which is where I feel most connected right now. I feel nervous sharing in front of men for some reason still. I mean, I'm sure that'll change as time goes on, but I am working the steps, and I'm getting ready to do my fourth step, which is actually really scary to me because there's some things where, first of all, I don't even feel like I can tell them to my sponsor, mainly around dishonest things that I've done, and not in the too far past either. Yeah, so that is like really scary to me. I'm like, well, maybe I can go get another sponsor who I don't know, because I don't want her to know that stuff about me. But I'm finding that for me, I'm such an extrovert, and the most important thing to me is my relationships with people. And so being in a fellowship where, I mean, I feel so loved and supported, and like even my friends who are here tonight, I just feel like, oh, that just like makes my heart so happy. And really, I can say that the biggest thing that I can see keeping me sober is for me the spiritual aspect of the fellowship and the program. I mean, it's like such a spiritual thing, and the fact that Christine would take my hands and say that prayer tonight, like what a miracle. I mean, to be connected in that way, and I just love how program is sort of the great equalizer, and people who I probably would never know or speak to or see anywhere else, like I feel so connected with, and I just love that. I do want to say that I have some fear and reservation about my sobriety. Like there's still a part of me that someone used the word reservation, and that's a good word for me. And I pray every day for God to take that reservation away from me, because I have a reservation about like, am I really an alcoholic? Like, do I really need to stop? And I know that the answer is yes. So that's it. Thanks.